What is up, you guys? Welcome back to Tidal Gardens. So, for the past 4, almost 5 years now, we have been working on this new building, this new facility, and it is very close to done. And we get asked all the time, like, when are you going to be done with this? And that kind of got me thinking about tanks in general and what it really means to be done with anything that we do in this hobby. So, first off, we should probably talk a little bit about just projects. There's always projects going on here. Some of it is like big time construction stuff to lay down the infrastructure, but oftentimes it's just these minor things that are intended to improve how we do stuff. But there always is something going on. This place is always in some kind of constant state of change. So, when is a place like this done? Or when is a really ambitious show tank done? And I think a lot of that comes down to what your goals were to begin with and kind of like how do you define success? And at that point, maybe you can start to get to some end point in mind, but it's really a lot more challenging to pin down than you might think. Because on one hand, you could say that, oh, well, this building has all the biggest systems already laid out and installed, and growing coral and selling. So, bingo, you've done great. We just got done building a podcast studio. So obviously there's some positive developments there. All of the show tanks that we set up are getting really nicely fleshed out. So there's some W's to be talked about on that end. But realistically, I look at the next things on the horizon, and we're not that close to getting done with anything. Like, there's always more things on the frontier. Going back just a little bit, getting done with some of these big projects, it feels really good because when you've been in project slash construction mode for so many years, it can get a little exhausting. I mean, I think that the excitement of getting a lot of this stuff done, it's definitely past. And what I feel now when I get projects done isn't so much excitement for the project, but it's like relief that that's kind of off of my desk. So, in a sense, it is nice to take a breather. I don't know if breather is really the right word for it because just because I'm done with projects, or in a hobbyist's case, when they've gotten done stocking and they're at that finally I can kind of sit back and enjoy my tank phase, it's still a very active process because just because you're taking a break, that doesn't mean the corals have taken a break. Your fish haven't taken a break. So, just thinking about the corals, for example, they are constantly growing. If assuming that you're doing it correctly, things are going well, corals will grow. Corals that grow into each other need to be pruned back. Corals, just in the process of growing, they're consuming nutrients and trace elements and macro elements at an exponentially growing rate. So you kind of have to constantly tweak that. Obviously, there could be some random setbacks, die-offs, pest issues, whatever it is. So in that sense, nothing really stays static there. And fish as they grow completely changes the game. So for example, we put in a bunch of tangs into our 600-gallon tank. They were more or less full grown, but as they get a little bit bigger, eventually what tends to happen is these well-made boundaries start to really overlap. Their territories overlap, and it's kind of like a game of musical chairs where there's always going to be like one tang that's on the outs and this gets beat to death. So we constantly have to like make sure that aggression issues are in check as these fish grow. So again, it's the idea of anything being done is kind of spurious because these systems are dynamic. They're always changing, and you always have to adapt to that change. Livestock aside, just because things are going well now doesn't necessarily mean it's going to continue to be okay, and that extends to your devices. So, a lot of our devices are things with moving parts, running in salt water. Guess what? Nothing survives that forever, right? So, on a hobbyist scale, it's not nearly so bad because you can kind of keep track of like a pump or two here or there. You can kind of stay on top of your maintenance of your return pump, things of that sort. Automation goes a long way for the hobbyist, which is wonderful. Automation on a scale like this, not so great. But it does become a chore to like keep track of all these devices that we have here to make sure that they're running properly. And I think that is in part why we're going to stuff that on paper seems insane. Like truly super high end pumps are multiples more expensive than a prosumer pump. So, for example, an Abiz A400 is every bit of 3,000 some odd dollars. And that is a lot more expensive than a fairly high end hobbyist pump. But it starts to make sense when you consider like how much value is in your aquariums, but also when you start to extrapolate that over a lot of pumps. At any given time, there might be a pump going down daily, just because if you have hundreds of pumps, it's just a matter of time. So for us, just making that investment into some seriously hardcore, robust pieces of equipment, it kind of makes that element of change, that element of chaos, a little bit more manageable, but it is something that still has to be managed. So even when we're making these big investments into infrastructure facilities, like that too changes. So we're never really done with that. So I guess what is my point in all this? Going back to the idea of like, when are you going to get done? And I think that the perspective has to change a little bit because it's not just a matter of getting to that finish line. It's understanding that there really isn't a finish line, and you kind of have to find satisfaction in the small incremental day to day. Then any small success is really ephemeral. It is a moment in time. And so much of this hobby really would be a lot more fun if you just enjoyed the journey of it, not necessarily trying to reach some finite endpoint, because there is no finite endpoint to this. As a total aside, one of the cool things about having a YouTube channel is that I can go back and I can see videos that we've done or that others have done when they were visiting Tidal Gardens. And I can see what this place looked like 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And even though I'm kind of in the weeds of it in the moment, being able to look back and seeing how far you've come is also like a really rewarding experience. So that's something else that you might want to consider, is just keep like a long-term journal. So just so that, you think that things haven't been progressing, but when you look back, even just 12 months, you'll see just how far you've come. So anyways, you guys, that's just my random thoughts on completionist theory, I guess, when it comes to reef aquariums. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all next time. Happy reefing.